I think that's working now. Hello and welcome to Watercolor Wednesday. And I apologize, my voice is completely gone. I lost it this week because we've all been sick at our house and the boys are doing great, but I'm feeling 100%. My voice is just not back at 100%. So just going to move forward and and then we'll hopefully be feeling better by next week. So in January, I'm focusing on getting started with watercolor. And one of the things I get asked a lot is how to get started with painting, how to set up your palette, how to choose the right paper, how to choose the right brushes, all that stuff. And we are going to dive in and talk about it. So I have two sets of paints here. I've got this Yarka watercolor set that came with these pre-filled half pans. So it's a pan set. And then I've got my palette. This is a Magello bulletproof glass palette. And then I've put my own paints in here. So the main difference is, these are both professional grade. And the main difference is this came with pre-selected colors, and this I was able to choose my own because I bought my own paints. I'm going to show you quickly too how to fill up your palette, how to get started. So you may have noticed if you've ever used a palette that when you mix on the palette, it kind of balls up and it doesn't stay spread out like you see a lot of artists' palette looking. And so you think something might be wrong, but honestly, that is how it starts out, just because there's that protective coating on the top. So if you want to, just lightly scrub your palette with some baking soda and water, and then rinse it really well and dry it off before you add in your paints. So this is what can happen. Your paints can just pop right out. And I just stick them back in with a little bit of water and it sticks. And the more you use it, the more your paints will stick to the palette. But if you want to give yourself a head start, do that baking soda and water wash before you put your paints in. And then I just open up the paint tube. And just squeeze in a little bit of that paint and let it dry. You don't want to use your paint wet. And I know that sounds funny, but the main reason is you don't want to waste your paint. If I were to, and I'm not going to because I will waste it, but if I were to dip into this paint right here, I would get a giant glob and I would waste so much paint, and they are not cheap. So wait for them to dry. And then what I do is I just get a little drop of water on each of these little paint colors. Just getting my brush wet and then allowing that water to drip into the paint. And this gives the paint time to kind of re-wet and soften. You do that with pan sets over here and with your tube paints. So I do this for a couple of reasons. The main reason is it makes it easier to pick up paint. Have you ever tried to pick up paint and you're like, I feel like I'm not getting anything onto my brush? It's because your paint is still super dry. So if you re-wet it, give it a minute to soak the water in there, your paint will be much easier to pick up. And two, the paint color will be more vibrant, which is awesome. If you've ever struggled with having really light colored paints, or paintings, and you're wanting something more vibrant and you don't know how people are getting such vibrant colors, it's probably because you need to wet your paints and give them a minute to just be wet and soak in. So there's that. And this goes for any paint, even if it's your little dollar Crayola paints. You'll want to re-wet them, give them a minute to soak. I used to have a spray bottle, just like a little, like, I don't know, spray bottle just full of water, and I would spritz all of my paints right when I sat down. And then I got everything ready, and by the time I was actually ready to paint, they were all ready to go. So you can see this is way easier now to pick up a lot of paint. Whereas over here, I'm not picking up nearly as much paint. Hope you can see that. Let me try again with another color. So we'll do this kind of red. So I'm just going to do one little swipe here. You can see on my brush all the paint that's on there. Versus over here where I didn't wet it. Oh, I did wet that one. I didn't wet this one. Down here, we'll do one swipe of paint. You can see how it's mostly water because that's what's in my brush. And then as far as choosing brands of paint, my favorite brand of tube paint is Daniel Smith. Any professional grade you can't go wrong with. I love Winsor Newton. This is Winsor Newton Cotman paints. This is more of a student grade. They're a tiny bit more affordable, but honestly, I would rather you splurge the extra $1 or $2 to get the professional grade. It's in a smaller tube, but it's a much higher quality paint, and you're going to love your results more. This is a professional grade. I think this whole set was somewhere around $50 or $60, I want to say. And I used this for a really long time before I switched over to tube paints. I just prefer the tube paints because I can choose my own colors, but honestly, the quality is there with this one too. This is Yarka, Yarka. Okay, now let's talk about paper. So I've got a couple of different blocks here. I've got my Arches cold press, my tried and true. And then I've got Canson hot pressed. And the main difference between a cold press watercolor paper and a hot press watercolor paper is the texture of the paper. So I don't know if you can see this. I'll show you. You may not be able to see it. Oh, and this is a brand new block, so I'm going to quickly remove this top layer. I don't know if you can even see that. But this versus, I don't know if you can hear that either, but this is much more textured, the cold press, and the hot press is really smooth. So when I'm choosing what paper I'm going to use, if I'm using watercolor, I almost always will reach for my cold press because I'm using a lot of water. The texture can really hold a lot of water. And then the hot press, I will use when I'm painting gouache paintings because I'm not using as much water. And I kind of like that smooth look for my gouache paints versus the watercolor, which will hold more water, or the cold press, which will hold more water. So, and these are blocks. I love using blocks because I don't have to tape down my paper. They're already secured to the block, and then all you do when the painting's finished, I'm not going to do it right now, but there's this little like gap right here, and you can either take a bone folder or a sharp knife and just get in between the layers, and then you just cut around the sides and it comes right off the top, and then you're ready with your next piece right underneath. So that's the same for both the hot and cold press blocks. And then over here, I've got another block, but this is a lower, or it's like a more affordable block. It's Fluid is the brand, and it's a cold press finish. It's only sealed along the sides. So I've got this whole edge up here that I can tear, and over here. So I like this too. It's a little more affordable. This, let's see. Let me show you really quick over here. Does it have it on here? Yeah. So this says 140 pound. And that's what you want. You want 140 pound at least, because otherwise the paper will just buckle. And then with Canson, it's also 100% cotton paper, which is more expensive, but it is such a game changer. I was so scared to use arches, and then as soon as I started using it, I feel like my art just was elevated. So if you're serious about watercolor painting, get yourself some arches paper and just paint in every little single corner, and just get used to this paper before you jump in. I know it sounds scary, but it's the best. You'll love it. And then let's talk about brushes. So these are not all of my brushes, but most of the sizes that or the different shapes that I have represented in my collection. So we've got the round brush, which you can see is, if I hold it up and down, I don't know if you can see that. It's just like a circle, and then the bristles come up to a point. So I have round brushes in every size because I use this one the most. It's also the most versatile for me. I can get really fine details. I can get bigger washes. So if you're going to invest in any brush, get a round brush. They're the best. And then we've got a flat brush, and that just means it's flat on the top. And these are really good for washes. So if you're doing like a sky or a larger area, this is really good. Then we've got an angle brush. So the angle is like the flat, but then it's just cut on an angle. And I used to use these a lot for like small details. I would just use the little tip, or like for leaves, you can get a fun shape with that. I'll do a demo here in a minute. This is a filbert, and it's basically a flat brush, but then the tip is rounded instead of just blunt. So it's like a flat brush. Here we go to the side, but then, yeah, rounded along the top. And then we've got a fan brush. I don't reach for this a ton, but I do have it. I don't know if you ever watched Bob Ross, but he always used fan brushes for his happy trees. So that's why I have one, just in case I ever want to paint a Bob Ross happy tree. And then we've got the cat tongue brush, which is like a flat brush, but then it kind of comes to this point here. So this is nice for washes or petals and leaves. It's a really fun one to play with. It's also a really tricky one to play with. So if you're feeling brave, go for it. This one I don't reach for very often just because it is a little more tricky to get used to. Same with this one. This is a dagger brush. So it's like an angle brush, but it's just got a really steep angle on it. And this one's very fun for leaves and petals as well. So let me show you. We'll just play around for a minute. This is my round brush. And if you have a variety of brushes and you're not sure how to use them or what to do, just play around with it. See how thin you can get your lines, how thick you can get your lines, what kinds of shapes you can come up with just by varying the pressure. So there's a round brush. The flat, this one's fun. You can just get a really even wash in your skies or just in a large area with a flat brush. This paper is not the highest quality. You can see the lines in between here. If I was using the Arches paper, these would have seamless blends in them. And then here's the angle brush. Let's use a new color. So we've got that same shape kind of going on as we did the flat brush. But then you can also play with the shapes here. So these brushes are, I think I've got mostly Princeton, and then this round brush is a Grumbacher. I think all the other ones are Princeton though. This one is a Blick brand. And then, yeah, the rest are Princeton. Princeton is my go-to. But if I'm like at a craft store and they don't have Princeton and I just feel like I need a new brush, then I'll just get whatever they've got. But Princeton is a very nice brush. Okay, this one is really fun. This is the Filbert. So you can see it's got that rounded edge, which is really fun. This paper is perfect for playing around because it's lower quality, and so I don't feel bad just playing. Okay, this is the cat tongue brush. Okay, just placing the brush down Look at that fun shape. It's like no effort whatsoever to get a fun leaf shape there. I'm going to have to play with this one more because it is really fun. Just fun to mix it up a little bit. I'm so used to just using my round brush that I forget I have it. Oh, I think my baby is awake from his nap. I'll need to wrap this up in just a minute here. Yeah, these are really fun. I've got a couple of sizes. This is my smaller one. This is the 1/2 inch. And then I've also got the 3/4 inch, which is a lot bigger, but I'm going to play with those. And then the dagger. You get really fine lines. And just by twisting the brush, I can get a nice leaf shape. Are you being sneaky, buddy? Will you go up with your brother? I'll be up in just a minute. Okay, go get a drink. Very fun. I'm glad I pulled these out because you just get into the habit of reaching for the same things over and over. And this is going to get me out of that, hopefully. I'm trying to paint happy little trees. Bob Ross style. I like that it's got those bristle marks. That would add a fun texture. Let's see. Okay, I'll hang out for one more minute and answer any questions if you have them while I just keep playing here. And then I will see you next week. I'm going to play with this guy. I kind of like that this brush shape is a little more unpredictable. I think it'll create a just more interesting painting. Very fun. Yeah, I need to play around with this some more. I want to know what brushes you have that you want to try, or brushes that you've seen here that you want to try. Mine, is this cat tongue brush. It is not super easy. I feel like the thinner lines, I'm used to being able to pull up and have texture there, but you kind of have to turn the brush as you go. It's a little tricky, but we're getting there. How long do brushes usually last? So it all depends on how well you take care of your brushes. And I've had some of mine for ages, and you can kind of see when, let me see, here's a good example. You can kind of see that the brushes are starting to kind of fray a little bit, or the bristles. But when I get them wet, they still look really nice. If for some reason you get your bristles wet and they don't look nice, it's probably time to retire that brush. You can keep good care of them by not leaving them in water. You want to use cold water. Warm or hot water loosens that glue that holds the bristles in place. Oh. And I hope that answered your question, because I have to go. My baby's super sad. So thanks for joining me today.
He needs a bottle.
He needs a bottle. He just had one.
He drunk it all.
Oh, okay. All right.